Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. I am the almighty Zentaco, and today we're going to be finishing our falling box tutorial. This time we're going to learn how to create a player and have that player push this box along the x-axis. As you see right now, we can create boxes at runtime. They will collide with the backdrop and each other. So all we need to do is add some collisions on the x-axis, which will be a little different, especially considering that the player can now push them. So let's go ahead and do some stuff. First, we're going to need to insert an active object. This is going to be our player. Then we're going to need to insert another active object. This is going to be a detector, which we're going to use to figure out if the player is colliding with and pushing a box. And lastly, we're going to use the platform movement object for our platform code because that is the fastest way to get a platformer up and running in Fusion. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and set up a basic platformer. That's going to be our player object. Let's name it player. And this is going to be our detector. Let's name it detector. I'm going to make it 1 pixel wide and I'm going to make it like 24 pixels tall. I don't want it to be quite the same size as the player. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new group of events. We're going to call this platforming stuff. And I'm going to set up a basic platformer. We're going to go ahead and skip ahead through the magic of editing. Okay, so we have created a simple platformer. We don't have this detector object following the player yet. We will do that in a second. But let's go ahead and test it. So we can create these, and I have collisions with the backdrop as well as collisions with these box objects. Now keep in mind, if a box object does fall into the player, because we haven't set up collisions on the box side, the player is going to get stuck in there, and then the platform moving object is going to make the player drift upward. So we're going to take care of that through code though. Okay, so let's go ahead then and have we're going to have the detector follow the player, and we're going to do this in a specific way. So whenever the player presses right, we're going to do this. We're going to take the detector and we're going to set on flag 0. And whenever the player presses left, whenever the player presses left, we're going to set that flag off. Okay, now based on the flag state, we're going to either have the detector follow the player to the right or to the left of the player object. So we're going to find out if the flag is on, and if so, we're going to set the position of this object. Set the x-coordinate to position x-coordinate of right edge. And then we need to set the y-coordinate to the y-coordinate of the player. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and copy this line and change it. We're going to negate this, so now we're going to find out if the flag is off. If the flag is off, then we want the detector to follow on the left. So set the y position to the y of the player object and the x position to the x left of the player because we want it to follow on the left side. Okay, so if we test it now, we have this detector following exactly where we want it. Actually, if you notice, it's a little off. If we're facing left, it is actually still overlapping the player. That's not going to work. So we're going to need to make sure that it is 1 outside of the player's boundary. So edit that and subtract 1 on line 28. We want the x position to be x left minus 1. That should make sure that the detector is properly placed outside of the object, which it is. Perfect. Okay, so now for the X move, what we're going to do, it's pretty simple. Let's just copy the entire group. We're going to edit the name. We're going to call it X move. And all we're going to do is go in here and we're going to find every instance of Y and we're just going to change it to X. So for example, on line 22, we're going to start the loop and we're going to call that check X. And we're going to run that number of box times, and then we're going to change all the instances of on loop to check X, and then we're going to change as well the loop index to be check X instead of XY, and then we're gonna have to modify exactly where this object goes, but right now let's just go through the whole thing and change all instances of Y to X. So I will skip ahead after that's done. Okie dokie. So we have finished changing all the instances of y to x. We haven't changed, though, the positioning of the mask object yet. And also, we are still updating the adding y to y speed and all that. So if we run this now, we will see it actually is going to run twice as fast. The objects will fall twice as fast. But that is expected based on what we've done. Okay. So now we're going to allow the player to push the box around. So that's the first thing we want to accomplish. And we're going to do that this way. We're going to add a line here on we're going to insert here on line 23. So insert a new event. Actually, I'm just going to copy line 23 and paste it and edit it. So we want to keep the on loop check x, and we want to also scope the ID relative to check x. We don't want to do any of the stuff here, though, so just delete all of the expressions. All right, so what do we want to do? We want to find out if the detector is overlapping the box. And then once that's true, we want to find out if the flag of the detector is on or off. Because based on the direction that we're facing, that has a different flag state. So this is how we're going to know if the player is trying to push to the right or to the left. So we will say, in this order, do on loop check x, ID equals loop index check x, detector is overlapping the box, and the flag 0 is on. If this is true, go to the box and set the x speed to 1. So go ahead and copy line 23, and we're going to make some adjustments. So we want to find out if the flag 0 is off, so simply negate that. And then all we got to do is set the x speed to a -1. Now we also need to set up a state so that the x speed nullifies if we are not touching the box. So we'll go ahead and copy and paste. And we want to do this. We want to find out if, delete the flag, we don't care about the flag now. We want to find out if the detector is not overlapping the box. If that is true, we're going to set the x speed to 0. Okay. So line 26, this is the positioning of the mask object. So let's go ahead and just delete that and start from scratch. Let's go ahead then. So the idea here is this. While we are pushing the detector, we want it to be 1 pixel to the direction that the box is going. So that's really simple. We'll just do it this way. We'll set the y coordinate to the y coordinate of the box because it needs to be centered there. So position y coordinate. And then we will set the x coordinate to the x coordinate of the box. And we're simply going to add the x speed. So what this will do is offset that detector by 1. So it'll either be 1 to the right or 1 to the left based on which direction we are pushing. All right, so let's go ahead and make this work by going down to line 29. And this is where we are, if the collisions are not happening, we're going to update the position. So right now it's set to update on the Y. We don't want to do any of that, delete all of that. It's real simple. All we're going to do is set the position. Actually, we're going to do this. We're going to set the add to the alterable value of xpos and add the value of x speed. Like so. And then we simply need to set the position of the box to the value, or the x coordinate rather, not just the position. Set the x coordinate to the value of xpos, because we're dealing with the y pos on the other loop. So this is the loop that deals with the x position. Also make sure that we are adding the x speed to the x position before we update. Fusion, sometimes things will be inserted in a weird order. So yeah, make sure you add the x speed first. So this should work. We should be able to push a box now. Let's find out. Okay, we can push it to the right, and we can push it to the left. Awesome. What happens if we have a box on top of it? It pushes. What happens if we push into a box? Well, that kind of glitched out. We don't have a collision yet with the player. Okay, we push into a box, and it has stopped the movement. So it seems to be working pretty well. Okay, so now we need to update how we deal with the collisions themselves. We're going to do that this way, so there's less lines of code. When we're updating the position here, we'll go ahead and delete these because we need to do this separately. All right, so we're going to go ahead and set the y coordinate of the box to the y coordinate. Rather, sorry, we're saying the y coordinate of the mask to the y coordinate of the box. That's easy. So now we're going to set the x coordinate to the x position of the box plus the x speed. So this will put it one ahead or one behind, depending on which direction we are pushing the box. Now, if we are going to, if we're going to have a speed of more than 1, you need to modify this a bit. So if you have a speed of just 1, this will work fine. But if the push speed is higher than 1, you need to do this. You need to find the absolute value. So you want to say add, put a parentheses around this. We'll say x speed, and then you want to divide by the absolute value of x speed. So grab x speed from there and close with 2 parentheses. What that will do is give you either a 1 or a -1, depending on which direction the speed is. So like if the speed was, if you're pushing at -30, you would return a -1, which is what you want. If you're pushing at 30, you would return a +1. So if you have a speed different than 1, you want to use this formula here. So we'll go ahead and use that. That works just fine. Okay, so let's see here. So overlapping a backdrop sets the flag 0 on. That's good. It's overlapping the box. Set flag on. So if the flag is off, we need to move the box a little bit. So let's delete both of these. We're going to do that this way. We're going to add to the value of xpos, and we're going to add the sign, which is what we did up on line 32, the direction rather. Sign is essentially the direction of a number. It'll give you 1 or -1. So we're going to return the sign of x speed, because we might need to push this more than 1 pixel at a time. If you don't need to push it more than 1 pixel at a time, you can just go ahead and add the x speed. But we're going to do that this way because we're going to use the sign formula. Retrieving x speed divided by the absolute value x speed, like so. And that will give us the direction. So we're going to add that to the xpos, and then we're going to update the x position of the object to the xpos value. So set the x coordinate to the value of xpos. And again, the order got switched around, so make sure we are adding the x speed to xpos first before updating it. And okay, finally here, when we are done with the loop, we want to modify one thing, and that is setting the, instead of the y speed to 0, we want to set the x speed to 0. Okay. Works like a charm. Now we need to add collisions on the Y with the player. And that's relatively simple. So all we got to do is add another dealio here where we check to see if the mask is also colliding with the player. So just copy one of these lines where we're doing the mask checks. And instead of overlapping a backdrop, we want to find out if it's overlapping another object, and that object is the player. So we got to do this too as well on the collide loop as well. So just copy like the backdrop one, and then replace the overlapping the backdrop with overlapping the player. So now we should be able to drop these on his head without breaking things. Yep, so now we have this collision with the player. So that works just fine. Okay, so this does work fairly well, but if we play around with it a bit, we'll notice that there's some problems. Like, we can get stuck inside of the boxes while jumping sometimes, which does not have the ideal effect. See that? It's a little goofy. Also, if we spawn enough boxes, we can end up with issues where the boxes actually get stuck within each other by 1 pixel. And then if that's the case, they can't be pushed. So we have to do a little more code to fix these issues when they transpire. They don't always happen, but when they do happen, it'll break things. And you don't really want to have an instance in your game where things are busted. Ah, here's one. Okay, so this one can't be pushed because it is stuck. It looks like it's stuck in the box below it. So like if we were to delete that box, maybe it refreshed it. So sometimes you have a problem like that. Now if your boxes are absolutely vital to finishing your levels in your game, you don't ever want them to get stuck. That's bad. So we need to throw in some extra stipulations. And that is always happening on the fall, on the Y. So let's go ahead and just make a new section here on the Y. And we'll call this Dealing with Contingencies. So we want to do some stuff on check Y. So on loop check underscore Y, not UY. And then we need to properly scope. So find out if the box, if the ID equals the loop index of check underscore Y. And then we want to find out if the box is overlapping a backdrop, which should never happen. Our code should be set up properly so that it doesn't ever actually go into a backdrop. So if that happens, something went wrong. And this is where we're going to fix it. And all we're going to do is pull it out. We're going to subtract from ypos 1. And then we're going to set the position, the y coordinate, to the value of ypos. And then we just want to copy and paste it, and instead of overlapping a backdrop, find out if it's overlapping another object, and that is a box. Go ahead and check the overlapping first. That's how I did it when I got it to work properly, so we're just going to go ahead and keep things consistent. So find out if it's overlapping a box. If it is, we're going to pull it out by 1, just like we did with the colliding with the backdrop. So now we need to sort where it's colliding with the player, so copy again, and find out if it is overlapping the player. If the box is overlapping the player, we're going to do this. We're going to set the global value of current ID to the ID value of the box so that it's properly scoped. And then we're going to start a new loop. We're going to call that collide player. And we're going to run that -1 times, which is to run it infinitely. So we're going to make sure we need to stop it later. Otherwise, you'll stall out your program. And again, want to make sure that we do set the current ID before we start the loop. Now, on loop, collide player. And then we want to find out if the ID of this object, the box, is equal to the global value of current ID, which that makes sure that we are using the properly scoped box, the one that did collide with the player. If that's true and the box is colliding with the player, so overlapping the player, then we need to pull the box up by 1. So we're going to do the same thing we did before. We can actually just, oh wait, that's out of order. Look at that, I had these all out of order. We can just subtract 1, and then we can set the Y position just like before, pulling it out. Now, because we ran it infinitely, we need to also stop it. So if it is not overlapping the box, or rather, if the box is not overlapping the player, and we don't need to bother with the ID scoping, if that happens, we need to stop the loop. So just replace what we got here with stop loop, and that was called collide player. All right, so that should be everything. Let's see if we can get some screwed up boxes, which we shouldn't be able to now. They should all always be at least 1 pixel away from each other. They should not be overlapping. Yeah, so it looks like we have fixed the problems that we had. You know, to be honest with you, I don't even know why it was doing that, but all right, there you go. It is fixed. So now we have a box engine that allows us to spawn boxes and push those boxes around. They can collide with one another and the backdrop. So that's actually super useful. You can also do some stuff where, like, on a collision, you can have it shake the screen and maybe kick up some dust in the corners. I'm doing that in my current project, so I think it's pretty cool. You could also add a thing where you press a button and it allows you to pull the box. That way you could get them so they're not stuck inside of one another. So I hope you guys found this video useful and educational. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. And if you need any extensive help, I totally recommend that you guys join my Discord channel, link in the description. Alright guys, well, I want to thank you for watching this video. And as always, you have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one.